From his perch, he can see so much. The view of the mighty gas giant that his world revolves around. It has been there from the beginning, and it is there now, and he believes it will be there till the end. His world has always been filled with exciting colors. Every morning was fun, a challenge, but the expectation of something new. He was a mountain banshee on the moon Pandora. He stretches out his wings and emits a mighty screech that could be heard for many miles. His vision is binocular, like many of his kin. Rustling through the treetops above him, the leaves so thick they cover the elevated branches over his head, he can hear his family waking up as well. His sister jumps through her branch and lands next to him. He snaps at her, wanting his space. His dark green color blends in perfectly with his surroundings, unlike that of his sisters, who sports a bright green palette with black stripes. She is one of the most beautiful mountain banshee. She had mated several times, and already had several children, many of whom have left the territory to go and start their own lives. Rota is his name. He whips his tail towards his smaller sister. She playfully bites back at him. Her name is Seze. He looks into the distance, at the cascading waterfalls, at the swaying trees, and at the many flying creatures. He yawns again, but this time, retracting his teeth and shaking his head vigorously to loosen up the muscles, he feels as though he's hungry. He looks at his sister and emits a series of clicks that only she can hear. She responds in kind by bobbing her head and clicking as well. Twisting her neck twice to the side lets him know that she definitely wants to hunt with him. Having two on the hunt is much more advantageous for Mountain Banshee. The siblings take off in flight, screaming the morning hello to the rest of their kinship, who reply in kind. Their very large tree home is alight with conversation, clicks, screeches, and calls. A very large mountain banshee, one of the only ones that sport a reddish color, flaps his mighty wings and takes off in a completely different direction than most of the flight. That is the siblings' father. He has sired many banshee that live in this tree, and most of his bloodline and children reside on this very tall tree that stands at about 492 feet in the air. The tree is so tall that on it the banshees can see across the entire land and even to the tips of mountains. Most of the other mountain banshee don't live here. They live on smaller scales. Rota's father has made sure of that he has the highest territory of them all. He maintains his status as one of the most elite banshee in the territory. Seze and Rota only made their home here mostly because of their mother. Their mother belongs to a rider. She has formed a mutualistic bond with one of the creatures that live in this tree. Two-legged, blue-skinned creatures who amaze the banshee at their ability to glide so effortlessly on two legs. Very strange-looking alien creatures. Rota always called them plants with eyes. He always marveled at the ability they had to spend their entire lives on their two legs. He thought them to be a very strange but beautiful addition to his world. On the floating mountains, a community of banshee have a ceremony. Seze is excited. She's always wanted to be a part of these ceremonies, and she's only been a part of one, and she was too young to remember it. Now that she lives in Hometree, she hardly gets to come out and spend time with her old friends. After all, she has to always make sure she's there for her Navi. Her old friends come up to meet her, and they are overjoyed to see her, flapping wildly in the air and doing loops and barrel rolls. Seze lands on the cliff face and looks up at them, squawking loudly in intervals. Her tail excitedly whips from side to side as she eyes each and every one of them in the sky. 4 of them are female, and 1 is male. The male lands beside her, a dark purple banshee. Rota never liked him. It's not that this male wouldn't make a good mate for his sister, but he always behaved with such disdain towards Rota. Rota was a very big part of Seze's life. From his point of view, if this male did not like her brother, then he shouldn't be around her. Seze thinks otherwise. She thinks that if you are mating with another individual, it should be between them and you. Anyway, before they could seal a bond by mating, Seze had gotten trained by Ntiri, her Na'vi partner. Seze's bond doesn't make her feel as though she's captive. As a matter of fact, now she can't imagine life without Ntiri. She knows her inside out, her thoughts, her ambitions, and who she is as a warrior. Seze actually has a lot in common with her. She has the same feelings and aspirations. She still doesn't understand Ntiri's species, but she does understand Ntiri. Ntiri also gives her the space and freedom to still be a Banshee, and in return, Seze pays her with her loyalty, never veering too far from her side. The dark purple Banshee nuzzles Seze's neck. Rota snaps at him, making his way up from the cliff face onto the surface of the floating mountain. Floating mountain being a very loose term here, as the rock that they are on is not that big. Not big enough to be considered a mountain. After the males finish sparring, they settle down and Rota goes off to be on his own. He communes with the other Banshee, seeing a group of 3 pretty females looking at him with googly eyes. Banshee are very expressive, not just with their bodies, but also with their eyes, wings, and tail. They all chitter and slap their jaws together, and then flap once with each wing, and they invite him over. And all at once, Rota has forgotten about his sister. After all, the call is strong and quite hard to ignore when 3 females are beckoning to him to mate. Seze is happy to be amongst her friends again. They all fly together to another floating rock that's even smaller than the one her brother and the rest of the community is on. As she lands, the dark purple Banshee male lands beside her. A light yellowish tan female lands beside him, one of Seze's old friends. She nuzzles the male and puts her neck under his and then looks at Seze in a loving, caring way, but also in a possessive manner, as if to say, "This is my male now, don't you know?" Seze cocks her head to the side and is actually happy for them. Banshee don't really know the meaning of jealousy per se. At least it's not practiced in their culture. They do know how to be protective over ones that are less fortunate or weaker than they are if they are in the same family tree. However, when it comes to mates, there is so many to go around. A massive part of Banshee culture is to live and let live. Now that Seze has ties with Ntiri, her Na'vi partner, it only makes sense that her mate, or her previous mate, would have found someone else. As a matter of fact, when the dark purple Banshee male and Seze were still together, they often engaged in group activities, where they would fly out, down below into the thick canopies, where it was dark and dangerous, and they would switch mates and role-play with their mates. The last roleplay that Seze and her dark purple ex-mate had together was when they pretended that the mountain and caverns came together and birthed an egregious monster of unfathomable strength and power. The yellow female that Seze's ex is with now pretended to be a minion of this monster and stole the purple male away. He mated with her to calm her. 'Twas just a game. Enjoying the roleplay, Seze had flown over to where it was happening and pretended to take the female away. She then made a showcase of mounting her for dominance, at which she was able to fly away with her mate. Just then, another minion had grabbed Seze, 2 bright blue males, and they had their way with her. Just then, the yellow female and 3 other females caught up and had their way with Seze's mate. All the while, them screaming and pretending they were in danger, they were mating in the sky and having such fun. Banshees sharing their bodies was actually an ancient pastime of the specific breed. Seze and her old mate were reminiscing on those times, and she wished him and the new female well, saying that they worked together so well and had such fun and chemistry role-playing. She would make a fantastic mate. As it started getting darker in the sky, Seze and Rota met back up with each other and went on their way to hunt. The females that Rota had just had a great time with decided to follow them on the hunt, and they were very successful. After they caught a meal, a very strange creature with heads on either side of its body, one of them attached to a very long neck and a stinger, they flew atop a strange tree-like structure that had a bulb growing out from the center of the summit of it. That strange bulb was covered in a membrane that pulsated different colors. A bright bluish-white color would fade in and then slowly fade out to give rise to a light pinkish color, and then another strange color that only banshees can perceive. The world was so much more exciting for them visually. It's also why they evolved to be so brightly colored. They appreciate physical appearance in such a way that many other animals don't. Every flaw and speckle either deters or arouses a fellow banshee. Seze complimented one of Rota's females. As they were all eating together, Seze picked off a piece of her meat and, in a show of generosity, gave her the piece. This younger female was flattered and did not expect what happened next. Seze, on her hind legs, stood up and then flapped her wings to make herself airborne only a few seconds before landing on top of this young female. Only moments after, Rota and the rest of his females watched as Seze rubbed her head and neck around the female's head and neck, making sure to brush past and make contact with every erogenous area. This young female was enthralled with Seze. Such power and confidence and elegance. Seze knew what she was doing. When their meal was over, the banshee all lay together, embraced within one another, each of their body parts making contact with someone else's body part. A tail wrapped around an antenna, a neck wrapped around a leg, so on and so forth, and they all turned their heads skyward, looking at the great planet that their moon orbited around, looking at the many stars far into the distance that not even the Na'vi could see. Beautiful show of glowing rips and tears throughout the sky and atmosphere that a lot of other creatures had not the ability to detect. Then they fell asleep together under the night sky. Rota looked at his sister and smiled inwardly, his antennae flicking up and down. He conveyed that he hardly got to spend time with her anymore, and she him. She nuzzled him and fell asleep. After about an hour of Earth time, the Banshee woke up and they flew back to the mountain. Rota and his sister said goodbye to their friends and headed back to Hometree. Rota's new females looking forlornly at him, wanting so badly for him to stay with them, but being terrified of going anywhere near Hometree. As much as it seemed like a beautiful experience based on the Banshee that always told stories of what their bond was like with the Na'vi, it scared a lot of the other Banshee, and they wanted to have nothing to do with the creatures that could seemingly control their minds to the point where they can control their flight. To these other Banshee, it didn't feel like freedom. It felt like they were being puppets. And the friends that came back, who they previously knew as very close associates or family members, now seemed like shells of themselves, as though they had been integrated into some sort of cult. As they landed in Hometree, Rota and Seze went up to the top branches. Their friends all welcomed them home. Most of the Banshee that were taking up residence in Hometree actually belonged to the Na'vi that lived there as well. As Seze happily went to sleep, she looked over at her brother and conveyed that something was coming, something important that she would be a part of with Neytiri. Rota was so happy to see that his sister was happy. She always had an eye for adventure. She seemed to shine brighter than the planet in the distance and every star in the sky and all the lights at night. When Seze flew, everyone stopped what they were doing to look at her. She was one of the most beautiful Ikran that Rota has ever seen. He was so proud that she was his sister. And one day, he would have adventures of his own.